3D politics. We're going to edit all the crap out, and you're only going to see the best stuff. That's right. We've got all three Davids, the Davids that matter, the most important Davids in Oklahoma. David Van, SoonerPolitics.org, David Oldham, ConstitutionalGrounds.com, and of course, Dave D'Ambroso on Dave D'Ambroso on Facebook. I'm Tom E. McKay. You catch me right there on Twitter. We've got a lot to get to tonight. We're going to talk about American ownership rights. Amazon pays more taxes than anybody else pays. And of course, the Trump Thanksgiving tweeting while he was out there golfing, students protesting global warming and everything else. You guys excited? Did you have a good Thanksgiving, anybody?
Very good. Very good. Very good.
Is that what we agreed on?
Genocide.
We agreed on earlier before the show. If I asked you, say yes.
We talked. We spoke about this.
You guys know Brandon Dutcher. I don't know if you know him personally.
Yes, but, good man.
Oh my gosh, Oklahoma Council for Public Affairs, some great stuff. OCPA. Brandon Dutcher had a great piece. American ownership rights led to the country's prosperity. Absolutely. This all has to do with the Thanksgiving break we just had, talking about why we're so thankful around here. And he's reading or writing and recounting the story of William Bradford. And here, this is Brandon Dutcher from November 23rd, OCPA. The colony's young governor, William Bradford, knew something had to be done, for in this instance, he wrote in his diary, community of property, so far as it went, was found to breed much confusion and discontent, and retard much employment, which would have been to the general benefit and comfort. For the young men who were most able and fit for service objected to being forced to spend their time and strength in working for other men's wives and children without any recompense. The strong man or the resourceful man had no more share of food, clothes, etc. than the weak man who was not able to do a quarter the other could. This was thought an injustice. That is, for doing less work, you receive the same as the man that did more work, and that seems pretty simply an injustice. And to finish up my direct reading so we can comment, so after much debate, Bradford recorded in his diary, every family was assigned a parcel of land, and each man was allowed to plant corn for his own household. I don't know if you guys have ever lived around people that had home gardens where they grow tomatoes or anything.
Victory gardens,
It's
I remember.
the bane of my youth.
So what you find
Doggone
out,
gardens.
so you know
Hated
what happens is, glad I brought it up.
WW2.
So what you know, what happens from the earth is that at first, once it gets going, they say, oh, take some, your neighbor that grows tomatoes. Oh, take some tomatoes because we have so many.
Yes.
And then when it gets close to the end of the season, they're like, oh my God, here's another 5 gallons of tomatoes. We got so many tomatoes.
Yeah.
We can as many as we can. We've charged as many as we can. We've saved and given away as many tomatoes as we can because the prosperity. Now, this is what happened in the first, when the Europeans brought over their metal implements and their ability to mass produce as far as agriculture went. Then they met up with the Indians' ability to know the geography of the land and the fish, agriculture, and that we know the Indians helped out. It was this meeting of the advanced technology of the Europeans and the Indians who were willing to share their knowledge of the land. And that second Thanksgiving, what happened was the Pilgrims had so many vegetables and such, like the tomatoes, they set up trading posts, which leads us to the capitalists.
Tom, that's not right.
I know. I was making the whole thing up.
I went to school much more recently than you did.
That's correct.
And what happened was that the natives, they had an Atlantean civilization, equivalent to what we would say the 23rd century would be like. It was like Star Trek.
That's 4 syllables, Atlantean. You have to explain it.
And so it was a futuristic, not underwater, but connected to the Atlantic Ocean civilization. And they had no violence. They had eliminated private property because they didn't need it. Everybody owned everything.
No waste.
I wonder, how do you steal land from people that don't believe in private property? I don't understand that one, but that's
they've
just
been making rich off the poor for so long, the poor are rich again.
So there's no violence, there's no infighting or genocide or human sacrifice among the native tribes. That didn't happen. But then the Europeans came over and introduced human sacrifice.
Oh.
The
really?
legend of Quetzalcoatl that actually comes from Europe. And they introduced all of that and killed
That's
all
not
the
in this-
buffalo. That's what happens.
Literally
Sorry.
not in this.
That's the
piece.
truth.
At least on the
It's fake
internet.
news.
Well, you can fact check that over at OCPA there. It's OCPAthink.org. It's a great piece by Brandon Dutcher.
Yes.
And
Also, go to Constitutional Grounds. I wrote a piece because I was looking for some pithy things to say, and I was struggling with some of the history. I didn't get in and read all of what Bradford had written, but it was interesting that there were competing stories, and the earliest published recounts of the history were done just in 1621
Yeah.
and 1622 by one of the settlers, one of the Pilgrims, and he had quite a bit to say about that time period. And so go over there. I've got the links. You can go to the MayflowerSociety.com and
yeah, that's
look it
over
up.
on constitutionalgrounds.com.
Shameless plug.
Shame.
It was. I think it might be on. I think I put it
I had
on
a tiny bit of
3D
shame.
Politics too. I'm just saying that's where the links are.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing though that they have left out the reality of the Bradford Diaries from the public school agenda for us.
If I could say, growing up in Minnesota, one of the congressmen from there, from western Minnesota, along the Red River of the North, is Congressman Bob Burley back in the 70s. He's a farmer himself. And he was part of one of these efforts from détente, and, we're going to get along with the Russians. And we did this kind of cultural exchange where Bob Bergman brought some Minnesota farmers over to the Soviet Union, to Ukraine. And it didn't take them long to figure out why Russia was having to import food for their people.
I have to stop you. Are there light bulbs in your jacket?
Yes.
It's my personality. It glows. All
I'm
right?
just now realizing that. Are there really light bulbs in your
Yes,
jacket?
there are. Yes, there are. I don't know if they'll show up on
Daniel.
camera,
All
but
right.
they're great.
Okay, but anyway, all he had to do, Congressman Bergman, who became our Secretary of Agriculture for Carter,
Who could forget?
but he said there was a storm coming in on the prairie, the plain of Ukraine, and every farmer who was a Soviet worker, when it was quitting time, they got off of their tractor and they just walked to their house. Didn't matter. Get fresh cut hay, and the storm's coming, going to ruin all of it. But it didn't matter. It wasn't his hay.
Right.
He gets to go home at 5. He goes home. Next day goes out there, the hay's roofed. Okay?
Right.
And this is it. The communists did not allow ownership. Therefore, their workers didn't have the incentive. Goes right back to Bradford. They started with communism.
Right.
Nobody had incentive. It didn't work. You got to have incentive.
Well, what happens? I mean, you see this all the time at corporations or family business, just businesses. Who has the greatest stewardship of company resources? Those with the direct stake, the owners, or the lowest person on the totem pole?
Yeah.
Right? I
Well,
mean,
the union rep on the GM board.
right, there you go. Yeah. Well, I mean, they really are the biggest stakeholder. I mean, yeah, they're holding
It's the
company
biggest
hostage.
stake holder.
I had to shut the lights off. It was distracting him. So.
The lights are not off,
They're
guys.
not off.
You just can't see them on the camera.
Oh, okay.
I can't think straight.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Yeah.
Well, one of the many failures of communism, I mean,
There
we
we go.
had to, I mean, this is part of the history that's not even told. I mean, the failures of socialism are so profound that we will never know them all. Because during the 70, 80-year failed experiment of the USSR, we fed them. The United States of America
Oh yeah.
fed the Soviets while they're pointing nuclear missiles at us.
Right.
So they didn't starve to death. That's not only the economic superiority of our system, but also the moral superiority.
Yeah.
Well, and the stupidity of if we're really at war, which was a Cold War, and we wouldn't starve them into submission to give up.
I don't know.
We just prolonged it for another.
That's a hard
30 or
one.
40
I mean,
years.
we just couldn't watch all those people. Because here's the thing. They were being held hostage by their government.
Mhm.
And the authoritarian states that last are the ones that are the most brutal. As soon as they start relenting, you see free market capitalism pouring in, and the free will impulses of people and self-interest move in and just erode those governments away. So I believe their government was so brutal that we essentially understood the citizens of the Soviet Union to be hostages. So I think in good conscience, we could not starve those hostages to death.
And to move on that, pivot on that moral superiority point, again, you're watching 3D politics with all three Davids and one Tom. Lately, the Handmaid's Tale has gained some fame and notoriety, suggesting that something about the conservative right would force women to have babies, when in fact it's Marxism, according to their ability, correct? That's communism, correct?
Yes.
Right.
And that would be each uterus.
Whammon.
It was actually fascism that promoted the
point-
women having babies.
The point is,
Democratic socialism.
to understand that,
Yeah, to say fascism is an economic.
let's not blunt the point here,
Yes.
gentlemen.
Yes, Tom.
To make the point, each uterus, according to their ability,
There you go.
each uterus, according to their ability, should provide children according to the need.
Except the Maoist communism, though, didn't do that. They limited you to one child.
Yeah, they killed all the
Understand, we're
rest.
running out of kids now.
Unless you lived in rural areas, I will not have you defame the communists.
There you go.
And
If you simply analyze the words, gentlemen, men need to have sex and women have the ability to have babies. So from each, according to their ability, to each according to their need.
what are you getting here?
What I'm getting to is A Handmaid's Tale is written by Marxism. That's what I'm getting at.
Are you saying that Marxists want to seize women by the means of their production?
Yeah.
They want to grab them by the uterus.
Yes, that's exactly what
Okay,
he's saying.
all right.
Or from that 70s shows, as Beth says, I
Now-
have needs.